Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And the story I'm talking about today is one of my own. It is episode 51 of my series, Worth 1,000 Words, where I write a 1,000 word short story based on a piece of artwork without an outline whatsoever. Not many updates today. I'll be pretty quick, although I did get a cool little figure I've been meaning to get for some time. He's sitting behind me on my back shelf right here. It is, let me just show you. It is Jack Torrance from The Shining Funko Pop. And ironically enough, this was not planned. I'm wearing my Shining t-shirt from Mondo. So really cool design. Go pick it up. This video is not sponsored. But anyway, we got Jack back here who is hovering over me with his bloody axe to force me to write these stories and everything else. So I need that. He's on my writing shelf. That is my shelf where I have, well, that part of my shelf is where I have all my writing craft books. So I thought it was appropriate. But anyway, let's talk about the music. I revisited an artist that I have not listened to in some time, and I was actually a really big fan of his. Still am a big fan of his. He did a lot of video game soundtracks. Oddworld, if you are old enough to remember that series of games. But the one I listened to is called Subway Meditations, and it's from way back in 2009. It is something I believe he sampled sounds on the subway and used that as accompaniment for his composition. So it's a great listen. I felt like it really fit the mood, which will become very apparent. And I know I say that every week, and maybe I should stop saying that. But again, before we check out the artwork, let me remind you that I am always looking for submissions. So if you do have a piece of artwork, you are just curious as to what my take on the story would be, please send it my way. I love doing those. I don't do them that often, so do not hesitate. All right, with that said, let's check out this week's artwork. This week's artwork is titled Shift. It is by a lead artist at Goodname named Ericus Pearl. Ericus has quite the portfolio, everything from horror to fantasy to Western to modern day to historical. There's all kinds of stuff here. Even one that I almost did. I think I'll probably have to do it on year 2 because I told myself I would never do the same artist twice in a year. Why did I choose it? Well, you're looking at it now. Hopefully that just answers itself. It's this great image, very mysterious, where there are these people walking along the edge of a building, and they are being drawn toward this strange glowing ellipse. Why they're doing this? They look exhausted, first of all. They look like they're sleepwalking, I guess. So I guess they're going somewhere. This was another one where I love the title because it really informed my approach, more or less, which you will soon find out. But I love the stark nature of everything. There's these birds up in the corner, which I never really addressed, but we have this bright glowing light, and it's just the counterpoint of that hotel sign. It was really interesting to me. Only because, do these people live in a hotel? Or is there just a hotel nearby? And what are they doing walking toward this thing? I don't know, but Ericus, thank you for this artwork. I love your entire portfolio. I look forward to looking into it deeper, and I highly suggest you, if you're listening to this, to check it out as well. So with that said, let's see what I came up with. Meg woke with gritty, throbbing eyes. She was supposed to remember something, but wasn't sure why. She turned away from the window brimming with sunlight. Face burrowed in her pillow to make it night again. She kicked her exposed leg in the tangle of sheets, hoping everything would right itself and she'd be back in the arms of sleep. She hunted the darkness behind her eyelids for re-entry, but found nothing but her head spinning, unable to orient itself. Spinning forever, a loop that would never end. A loop. A circle, an ellipse. She was torn from her almost dream to face Brett and his oversized sleeping shirt of crumbling ink, which looked like, "You are my sunshine," Brett sang, stripping the sheet off her. "I almost remember. What are you doing in my room?" Meg rolled over with her eyes in the crook of her arm. She was so close. To what? "Saving you from missing your shift," Brett said, changing into his work clothes in front of her. At least he'd already had pants on. Screw that job, Meg said. Brett whipped up the sheets into a bubble that settled nicely on her now empty bed. The wet sidewalk is more comfortable than a hotel bed now. She side-eyed the blanket, fighting the urge to dive back under. The pile of clothes hit her in the face, teasing that sweet darkness again. By the time she pulled them off to dress, her bed looked like she hadn't slept in it at all. Brett stood beside it with crossed arms, toe tapping, smirk growing. Meg scowled. You'll be well compensated for your service. A simple thank you is all I require. Brett was already behind her while she faced the mirror, doing her makeup better than she ever could. Going to need some extra foundation for those dark circles. With the vanity light turned on and her eyes adjusted, she saw the same dark circles under Brett's eyes. That makes two of us, Meg said. Brett tossed the brushes onto the table and stepped away, heading for the door. She could tell he was checking himself secretly with his own compact. Your feet, Meg said as Brett slipped on his shoes, sockless. But he was out of the door before she could finish. She scrunched her toes on the carpet, and they felt curiously cold with a different kind of grit than what plagued her eyes. She turned a foot over. A layer of dirt not found even in a hotel room like hers, flaking like the old ink on Brett's shirt. Meg barely finished her shift. The walk home felt like she was losing control, like she was a body of flesh with no bones. Brett helped her, but was exhausted too, using the wall as his support while he supported her. They stopped a moment under the neon lights outside their rooms that plainly read, Hotel. We can't stop, Brett said. I feel like I'm going to float away. He chuckled. If only. What did you dream of last night? Meg asked. I don't dream. Sure you do. Think hard. He looked at her with black eye sockets, the red light only catching his forehead and the bridge of his nose. Of that, Brett said, tilting his head back and pointing up. The contrast of red against black made the bags under his eyes look worse than she remembered. A sign? No. Meg moved to his vantage and found his finger jabbing through the center of the O. It strobed. She blinked, rubbed her eyes. You see that? See what? Brett was already fumbling with his keys, the wall left to hold her up. After the door opened, he helped her to her room, which was right next to his. Her head hit the pillow, and all she could think of was how she hadn't asked Brett about his feet all day. The thought made her smile. Why, she didn't know. Her window was a red, flicker-free rectangle. The ache in her eyes was the only pulse, but it wasn't a distraction. It was a guide, made of stairs and rails and edges and brick. It led her forward, then up, then back and forth and up at the same time. She should be sick with all this movement, but she wasn't. Her body was accustomed to it. You never get sick in a dream, because that's what this was. She told herself so, over and over again, so she'd recall all the details in the morning when she'd tell Brett and finally ask him about his feet. The thought made her smile, and she knew why. She heard the patter of the objects in question behind her. Her dream allowed her to observe, and she saw Brett, barefoot, balancing on a few inches of concrete with ease. Brett, Meg said. He didn't respond, just kept moving toward her, which pushed her on, and reality set in. Vertigo overcame her, and she reeled, everything going fish-eyed. She thought Brett might catch her, like he had on the way home, but he didn't. As she teetered on the edge, blackness tinged with red opening below to take her, a brighter light opened, chasing away the darkness. Her eyes hurt no longer, and she no longer feared falling, because she was floating. She faced the light, not by choice, but it felt right, and allowed it to have her, to own her, to use her for whatever it deemed fit. The last sensation she experienced was the sound of more feet than two behind her. She didn't care about what she wanted to ask Brett about any longer, or even who the people were behind him, or where this light was taking her. She would end up in her bed again, with eyes full of sand that would carry her through another day until she would do this all over again. This time, she would remember. Yes, this time, she would remember. All right, let us delve deeper into the words of the story. So, I immediately needed a protagonist or a POV character, and so I went with the woman who is the first one in line to float into this glowing ellipse kind of thing. So, as I mentioned early on when I was talking about the artwork, the title of this greatly informed where I was going with it. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I think it was a good thing for timing purposes and just getting the words down, but also maybe I think it led me in a way, which, you know, good or bad, it could go either way. But so let's take a further look here. What I decided immediately, and you can see here when I said Meg woke with gritty throbbing eyes. She turned away from the wall. I imagined that all of these people were essentially being forced to, I don't know, go on some shift work. I don't know what it meant. I don't know what it is. Is it some kind of alien abduction? Is it alternate dimension where they're going and being used for something, and then sort of like in a dream state, and then they're being plunked right back down into their bed with very little sleep and recovery time. Hence, what I was talking about, you know, her the gritty, throbbing eyes, and I really thought about, you know, when you stay up really late and you sleep and you don't get quite enough, and you wake up, you just have that terrible feeling in your eyes, and then really that's the only way I could describe it. And so that's what I was thinking immediately is now maybe that's just the way I would describe it and nobody else does, but that was my first tell, the very first line. You know, she woke with gritty and throbbing eyes, meaning something is not quite right. And the fact that she did not get much sleep. And so I continue to seed that idea, right? Throughout all of this. She probed the darkness behind her eyelids for re-entry, but all she saw was another window full of bright. I changed all that later because I wanted her to, once I got to the end and discovered that she was sort of aware in her dream of what was happening, and she wanted to tell her friend Brett, who was the man following her into this ellipse, that what was going on, and she knew what was going on. And however, it's just this infinite cycle, right? She has this dream, she goes into this thing, she forgets, she wakes up, she's not quite sure. And so that's why I removed that part. The seeing the other window full of bright light floating in a haze tinged with red. So that was the oval thing that I had to remove because I didn't like her to have that memory, although it could have worked. And then I decided to introduce it. I don't know. So this is a weird maybe it was bad of me to do this, but I saw the sign hotel and I just imagined all these people are living in a hotel. And I know that's probably stupid because there's probably apartment buildings everywhere, and it just happens to be there's a hotel down below, and it was nice compositionally for the artist to do so. But I went with it. I don't know. Maybe they're sort of just scraping by and they can't quite get an apartment, so they're forced into a hotel room. And I imagine that Brett lives next to her. They're great friends. And here's kind of what you're seeing now is establishing saving you from missing your shift. So there is the title, and it's kind of a duality there because she's going to work during the day for her shitty shift, and then only to fall asleep very briefly, and then have to go to this all nighter. So it's funny, you know, when I'm talking or I'm thinking out loud, I'm thinking through this, and it sounds kind of ridiculous. It just sounds like a Chinese factory that has like two shifts, except it's the same group. Because I remember I used to work for a company who still has a Chinese factory, and they would work in shifts. They'd work 12-hour shifts. So half the factory would be day shift and half would be night shift. So it would be running 24 hours a day. So I don't know, maybe maybe part of that influenced what they were doing, having the 24-hour shift. What I mentioned, or what I will talk about later in the final thoughts, I think is the fact that I never really found that hook, right? How can I say it? Just, you know, when I'm writing these stories, sometimes I will have an epiphany while I'm doing it. I'm like, okay, this is the core of the story. This is what it's all about. And whether or not it is, you know, explicitly spelled out on the page or not, I know it and I try to hint at it in the writing. to where the reader can comprehend, what's going on. They can sort of glean that idea. This one, I didn't have it. I didn't have anything. I didn't have, the solution to this image. And so what I did is I just decided to tell this kind of story. It's almost as if, and I guess this kind of makes sense, right? Because if Meg is having a problem remembering, right, the mystery is never really solved. She solves it briefly in her dream, but then only to wake up again and have it completely gone. Even though she knows something is there. She knows something is hiding sort of behind her eyes in her memory somewhere. She just can't quite get it. And that's how I ended it. Yes, she's going to remember this time. Yes, she'll remember. And so I guess it kind of works. And I don't know if it's one of these things where I'm ascribing meaning to it. There's the scene break, which was strange. I wanted time to pass. So we'll see how that feels in a 1,000 word short story. But anyway, yeah, I don't know if I'm sort of ascribing meaning to this, after the fact, just trying to make it work. But, whether or not I'm doing that, let's just say that I'm both am and I'm not. It makes sense to me because literally the story is a mystery, right? Nothing is really shown. Like we never really learn the true meaning of what this ellipse is, this portal, and neither does Meg because it is from Meg's POV. So in a way, I feel like if I would have told it in third person omniscient, I could have given something away without the character knowing. But I never write that way. Well, I haven't yet, I don't believe. And so because of that, I would have to have Meg know something, or at least because the story is very linear, I could have had her, realize it exactly what was happening because she did remember. I guess she kind of did, right? She was witnessing all of what's going on. However, we didn't quite get to the point where we discovered what was on the other side of the portal, which I think is okay. I'm a fan of mystery. It's more about the experience of the characters and, making you feel for them in terms of, the struggles they're going through. And so here I start, having Meg ask about what Brett dreamed of last night, because I wanted to have this idea that she's constantly remembering something. It's just right, on the tip of her tongue of something is going on, and she's looking to her friend who she knew or maybe doesn't know at this point the experience that he had as well, and so she's just trying to pry that out of him. And honestly, I still had no idea where I was going. I was looking at the words below. I'm already at 600. Tick up, tick up, and tick up, and tick up. And that was one of the reasons why I was a little worried about using all 4 characters. I feel like it could have been interesting because, clearly there's a reason there's 4 people in here. And I just really talked about 2, briefly mentioning the extra people toward the end. But we don't know who they are. And, there's always just an near endless or endless amount of ways to tell the story. And so I think if I did it again, I would try to integrate all 4, right? Because clearly this is the moment when Meg is in her dream, well, quote unquote dream. She's in reality, and she's floating up into this portal, getting ready to start her shift just after she looked and saw Brett walking behind her. So because there are 2 additional people in here, there is some importance there. I could have done something with the birds. I feel like that would have been a smarter move as well, because I really like to. In one of the stories I wrote, I noticed a character in the darkness while I was writing. I didn't even notice it when I chose the artwork. And luckily I noticed it early on in the writing because I tend to do that. I'm pretty much just like staring at this artwork for the most part as I type. And that really informed the direction of the story. And I don't know, I like using as many elements as I possibly can because it's one of those, like, it all just seems to come together, right? If you focus in on one small part of it, I feel like you're kind of missing the point of the exercise in this what I'm doing here anyway. Because I did talk about the portal, I talked about the people, I talked about the hotel. I mentioned there was a haze of some kind. There's clearly a haze. And that was about it. I mentioned, brick and rails, that moment where she's kind of in a dreamlike state where she's going up that fire escape, I imagine, to get onto the edge of that building. However, there's probably a better way to get up there. But anyway, I think there's probably a clever way to use this device, this light, that I didn't. So, but that's okay, right? This is something where you're just kind of digging into your subconscious to try to find a story. It's not about sitting down and really plotting this out because I think a lot of people overplan. I'm very guilty of attempting to do so. Like in the first novel I wrote, on my commute to work, which is only about 25 minutes or so, I would talk to myself. I'd think out loud, I'd record it, and in the evening I would come back and I would listen to it and I would jot down notes because very often I kind of come up with solutions as I think out loud. For some reason, it's much easier for me to think out loud than it would be just in silence. I don't know why. Maybe it's just hearing the words come out is something that pushes me on. The same way writing in a journal does, writing in a notebook, right? So I'll write my thoughts out because sometimes when you're alone and there's people around, talking out loud can be distracting or very weird. So that's my other method is to essentially think out loud on the page. I'm literally just never stopping writing, just to keep it flowing. And I found that that really helps problem solving too. Just sitting in a void, in a mental void, staring at a screen or staring out the window, that doesn't work for me. If it works for you, great. I tend to also get a lot of my ideas when I'm not even sitting down to do anything. It's just like it'll come to me as I'm walking or at the store or whatever it may be. But if you're really trying to get those ideas out, give it a shot. The dictation, the talk aloud thing was just something I started to do. However, the notebook, and I've still yet to really, I've started it with a novel that I'm working on now, but Tim Schafer of Double Fine Studios, it's a video game studio. What he does is he goes out and buys a big notebook, just like a $2 notebook, a cheap one. You don't need to get a fancy moleskin one. And he sits in his office and writes for about, I think, 2 to 4 hours, something like that. And he just kind of writes and scribbles and doodles in his notebook. And by the time he fills up the entire notebook, he knows what the story of the game is. He knows the game he's going to make. And so I said, wow, I wonder if that worked for just like writing a novel. And so I've attempted to do it and I've dedicated a notebook to a single book and it's helped so far. However, I feel like haven't quite filled it up. Maybe I should have really stuck with it and gone all the way to the end. I've kind of moved away from the notebook and just created plot points. I used that process definitely to figure out the characters, the overall plot, where things were going to go, conflicts, relationships between the characters. But then I stopped. So maybe I should have kept going. But I know I'm really digressing here. The moral of the story is, I think in this one, is you do not have to always solve the mystery, right? I know a lot of people like knowing all the answers in films or books or games, but I just think there's a real power with the unknown. Now, you don't want to just, it's a delicate balance because you don't want to not reveal anything, right? You want to give enough to where the reader, the viewer, the player can come to their own satisfying conclusion, or it gives them enough to be like, all right, that I'll take that. I'll take it. And so right now in the edit, I actually was, I think, just barely over 1,000 when I started to do this. And what I wanted to do, once I got to the end and I knew this was about her not remembering, I wanted to foreshadow a lot of elements that were circular. That's what I was trying to do anyway. Like not only the dark circles under the eyes, but those are circular in nature, meaning that this elliptical portal she's going into, as well as mentioning things like loops and circles. Hopefully that's kind of foreshadowing somewhat of what's going on. I could have done it even more, I'm sure. And I feel like, circles are a very common shape in our world. And so I could probably do it without it feeling heavy handed. And so this last bit was mostly that. It was very light cleanup. It was mostly about just seeding the idea early on. And I think that's really, well, here it is right here. A loop, a circle, an oval, or I changed to ellipse. She's, I'm trying to seed that. It's almost as if because this is from her POV, is like she's almost there. She's almost has it figured out, but not quite. Not terrible time, not amazing time, but I think the last one was about an hour. So this one, I think about an hour 20. But I'm happy with that. I wasn't super happy with the story when I finished it, but as I went back and read it, I was like, it's not too bad. I kind of talked myself into liking it, I guess. I don't know. That's why I always like to let these sit for some time and then come back to them and just see how I feel, because that's what I love most about getting these ready for publication is revisiting them and seeing like, the good and the bad in them, and how I can, maintain the spirit of what I was trying to do, but also clean it up, right? A lot of these have typos and grammatical problems and continuity issues, but that is what I am working on presently. And if you join me on my streams, you will definitely know that. And so here I am, back and forth, 989, pushing my way to 1,000. I've already hit it, but I'm trying to. And I think actually I write one more line. I think it's the very end. Yeah, I think I added. Okay, here we go. I'm editing the last paragraph, talking about how she doesn't care anymore, or even who the people were behind him, or where this life was taking her. She would end up in her bed again with eyes full of sand. And yes, this time she would remember. Welcome to the end, dear viewer. I'm so glad you made it. This is where I talk about my final thoughts, what I liked, what I didn't like. And let's start right off the bat is that I wasn't completely happy with the story. When I finished it, I was just kind of, I shrugged it off as in, hey, you know what? You don't win them all. But in reading it again, I found some things that I started gravitating toward. And this is one of those few stories where I started a lot of the events off the page, off the painting. Right. I even had a scene split. I don't know. It's probably not apparent in the reading of this, but there is a moment of time passage right smack dab in the middle, which you will have seen if you read it on my site. But anyway, some things that I liked were I kept the mystery. Sometimes I like to solve the mystery, and that is really one of the things that concerned me the most is that I didn't really explain anything. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, it's kind of cool to just sort of take a snapshot, right, of these people's lives and just explain what's going on. You don't always have to solve it, I guess, is the moral of the story. And so I ended up being a little bit more pleased with it as I read it again and thought about it a little bit more. However, some other things I didn't like is there are numerous people in the image. There's not just two. Brett and Meg are the two people that I spoke about, and I briefly alluded to the fact that there were more people behind Brett, but it might have been more interesting if I would have created sort of some kind of relationship between all these people. Maybe they're friends, maybe they're relatives or something. Maybe there's some interaction there. I decided not to do that early on because I was worried about the word count. I was worried that balancing 4 characters like that might have been a little bit difficult in the short word count, but again, maybe not. It might have been cool if I were, leading these people to some weird dimension. Maybe the girl who's leading them is actually in on the whole thing. I don't know. There's a million ways this could have gone, and I think that maybe that's what makes the mystery interesting in this regard is that I shouldn't have been so concerned with trying to solve it or explain it. Just keep it a mystery and just let's peek into this world and see what's going on. And clearly what I established was this recurring thing. And I did pepper that in after, and I will talk about that or I did talk about that in the writing analysis. Once I got to the end, I realized that I needed to kind of foreshadow is the right term, but just add little details here and there about like, I don't know if you've noticed it, but like the loop, circle, mentions of things like that, how she knew she was supposed to remember something, but she didn't. Those are the things that I returned to and added back to hopefully make the ending a little bit more powerful and make it feel like I knew what I was doing as I was writing it, even though I never do. It just sort of happens and I clean it up enough to make it coherent, but there it is. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, or if you did, let me know in the comments below. And again, always, if you have a piece of artwork you'd like me to write a story to, send it my way. I love doing it. And if you like this video and you want to support the channel, give me a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you like story-related content. I have live streams on the weekend. Most weekends I've been on vacation, so I've skipped a couple. Also, check out my books in the description. I got one coming out very shortly. I finally finished the complete cover and figured out what I want to do for the chapter headings. So I'm going to get a proof sent to me once I submit it to Amazon. Just take a read through it, make sure everything looks okay, and then I'm going to release it. All right. Well, on that note, keep reading, keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read the story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't edit anything else, promise. Thanks again.